Welcome to The Last Call. It's a conversation between two boozy hacks. I'm John Sweeney and I'm in London. And Michael Weiss, he's in Bophuthatswana. So how are things?
I'm pretty sure that's the incorrect way to pronounce that, but I'm doing fine.
It is.
I am tired and addlepated as always, but feeling pretty good.
By the way, Bophuthatswana is the correct way to pronounce it. And I can tell you that because I was there when there was a coup d'etat in Bophuthatswana, which was
coup d'etat, I can affirm you pronounced correctly. The former, I'm
anyway, for those of us who are better educated than from the boy from Brooklyn, I would like to, or Queens or wherever he lives now, I'd like to point out that Bophuthatswana is the new name for New York because you're having a coup, or are you? Tell me what's happening.
No, there's no fucking coup. I mean, look.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay, goodbye, folks.
Shortest podcast in world history. Liberals love to be their own worst enemy and their own kind of stoker of hysteria and paranoia and, frankly, conspiracy theory. I mean, look, I just wrote a piece, The Spectacle of Unsuccess for Donald Trump. If you've watched the last few days, this is a guy who spent the day the election was called golfing, and he's been tweeting his usual nonsense, and every tweet is now caveated that this is bollocks, this is untrue, this is disputable. This is a guy who's having a psychic crisis, a breakdown, if you will, because he understands that he is lost. But he is also incompetent and ineffectual, and I think, frankly, too spent to do anything really sinister and alarming. I mean, the best he's got is filing lawsuits. I mean, he's lawyered up, and every single lawsuit that's been filed has been swatted down by the judge. Rudy Giuliani speaking.
And by the way, here's a visual clue.
I mean, for me, the juxtaposition that will forever be emblazoned in my cortex is it all began with a puckered asshole descending a gilt elevator in New York, and it all ended with his lawyer ranting and raving next to a 10th-rate merchant of butt plugs. That is the denouement, which I also pronounced correctly, that America has. It's a little bit better than we deserve, frankly, but I'll take it.
But hold on a second, you're being unfair, because it was twixt the adult toy fantasy store.
No, next to it. No,
and the cremation center.
Yeah, fine.
So from the cradle to the grave has been readorned, rewritten by Donald Trump from the adult toy fantasy shop.
You know what it is, and this is also better than America deserves. It's a cross between Naked Lunch and Evelyn Waugh's The Loved One. That's how it all comes down, right? And that's fine. I mean, I'm okay with this. Look, you're seeing. I mean, this. They are running on.
By the way, are you drinking?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. All right, come on, drink.
Okay, Dad.
Well, Junior, it's good to hear, but there is no coup. But when you see Pompeo, there's a Secretary of State.
Yeah, no, look, that was
talk about there'll be a seamless.
And then he chuckled right after he said it. It was his attempt at bad humor. I mean, Pompeo has no authority as Secretary of State. I mean, he's our foreign minister. The one to really worry about is William Barr. But I've been reading carefully what this guy has been saying. You've got a situation in which even the most diehard loyalists in the administration and in Trump's inner circle understand that it's over. They understand that he has lost, that it is mathematically impossible, even if you did 1,000 recounts, for him to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and I mean, maybe Georgia, but even that's looking like a foregone conclusion. So for them, this is crisis management time. This is how do we deal with a toddler having a temper tantrum, or somebody who is having this kind of psychotic break from reality, or I should say actually the opposite. It is a dawning of reality for somebody who has been living in a psychotic break from reality for so long. And I think, I am a parent of, as we like to put it, a very strong-willed 5-year-old. And the only method of parenting that is advised when your child is going through a temper tantrum is not to really intervene, not to, wag the finger or become the disciplinarian, is to let her cycle through. She has to get it out of her system. And then you can have the conversation, right? So what was that about? And, why did you beat up on the dog? Or this is why we couldn't give you a cookie. You're seeing the temper tantrum, and I think, frankly, in its final stages. And so you've got the apparatchiks of the Republican Party either going on telly and saying, election stolen, the dead have risen from the grave and cast ballots in Bucks County. And I mean, but they don't, look at Lindsey Graham. He looks like a fucking dog who's gone through the car wash with the top down, right? Even they know it's done. It's just, this is their way of, they have an audience of one. And then the rest of them kept their mouth shut because they know. Cycle through the tantrum. The only thing we can do. The New York Post, as I speak, within the last 15 minutes, the New York Post ran an unsigned editorial, meaning the editorial from the paper. Mr. Trump, your legacy is secure. Now knock it off with the stolen election stuff. You're embarrassing yourself, and you're embarrassing all those of us who have defended you, even on the indefensible. So no, when the New York Post, tells him it's over.
Yes, it's over. I need to explain a couple of things to British viewers. First of all, a cookie is American English for a biscuit.
Oh, God.
Secondly, the New York Post is owned by Rupert Murdoch.
Mm.
So what's exciting about that is that it's Rupert Murdoch who is firing the gun at Trump.
And, the real diehard MAGA types have now turned their fire against Fox because Fox called Arizona or CNN and MSNBC. So now they're saying, well, they're saying a lot of things, but the two substantive things for me anyway that they're saying is Fox is now enemy of the people. And so go to OANN. They've all become OANNists, which is appropriate. And Newsmax. Those are the news sources for alternative facts or alternative reality. And the other thing they're saying, although they've been banging on about this for a while, is fuck Twitter. Twitter cost us the election. They censored Donald Trump's truth-telling. Go to Parler, which is, I don't know, right-wing Twitter. So anyway, there, even again, the true loyalists are starting to cannibalize themselves. And for me, what was very interesting too, and this is where I started to really worry a few days ago, the pro-Trump mobs that were stalking the ballot counting facilities, particularly in Maricopa County in Arizona, they disappeared within 24 hours of the election being called on Saturday. There's a BuzzFeed reporter who drove by and not a single red hat or, so what does that tell you? Now you're going to have, these outcroppings. I mean, CNN, Donnie O'Sullivan, who's a great reporter, just went around, I forget where it was, but talking to Trump supporters who say the election was stolen, just putting a microphone up and asking very simple questions. Also very enlightening and frankly terrifying about the state of a good size of the American electorate. But even these people, I mean, the fact that they're willing to talk to a CNN journalist at all should tell you I think they know that the jig is up. By the way, Reuters Ipsos poll showed 80% of Americans, with over 50% of Republicans, believe Joe Biden won. So that's 20%. And by the way, the remaining 20% of that figure, I think only 3% believe Donald Trump won. So this impending or imminent civil war that we've been promised, I mean, you're going to have morons and you're going to have cranks and you're going to have fantasists. I mean, we've had that before. But I think for as sober as the MAGA types can be, for the sober-minded ones, they understand it's finished, it's over. And they're not going to have the tribune that they once did, which was the President of the United States kind of I'm mixing my metaphors here, but whatever. President of the United States encouraging them, flattering them, winkingly encouraging the worst of the worst to commit acts of violence, or at least tolerate those who commit acts of violence. All that will be taken away. I mean, so yeah, we're in the toys being thrown out the pram stage of Trumpism, which is, frankly, this could not have gone better to my mind. Even the stuff that's a bit creepy is also hilarious and also encouraging.
But our three listeners, Sid and Doris Bonkers, are not here for moderately expressed common sense. They're here for existentialist gloom. So let me throw one thing.
War with Albania starts tomorrow. It's wag the dog, except this time David Mamet is a speechwriter for Donald Trump. There you go. Your worst case scenario come to life.
I'm actually weirdly Albania, or actually even better, Kosovo is a place where Sweeney shares. The value of Sweeney stock is high. I can go into that, but it's too boring. However, all I can say is Falamandera, which is thank you in Albanian, and moving on quickly. My anxiety, so what happens if the Trumpists say, or the Trumpians say, okay, the electoral votes for Pennsylvania, we will take them and give them all to Trump? I've been seeing that kind of anxiety on Twitter. Explain to a British audience or some American, anyway, explain to two people why that's a silly thing to worry about.
Well, I mean, theoretically, is it possible? Sure. But practically, I mean, again, the Republicans did not do badly in this election, the down ballot Republicans. I mean, and even Trump, frankly, I mean, he got 70 million votes. I mean, the highest number of votes for any sitting president in history, even though Biden has eclipsed him by 5 million. But this would be the coup, right? To say the will of the people has been nullified. Republican electors from Pennsylvania should disregard the votes won by Joe Biden, and they should file their electoral college votes for Donald Trump. That would be a coup. That would be essentially the beginning of the Civil War, because I mean, this has never happened in American history, even with close-fought, contentious elections. I mean, Florida was a Republican state under George W. Bush, and that's a whole different argument that made it to the Supreme Court, and I think was wrongly compared to the current situation. But Biden has won a convincing,
and also the numbers were very, very small. It's like,
they were very small, and in every single state, including the ones that Joe Biden frankly could have lost and still won the election, he is leading by over 10,000 votes. So any expert in electoral analysis will tell you no recounting is going to flip the script for Trump in any of these states. Maybe Georgia, now they're doing a hand recount, but even there, I think, is very low odds. So no, I don't see this playing out. I mean, look, and by the way, Georgia, you've still got statewide elections, which could help determine, I think, unless I might be wrong about this, but could help determine who wins the Senate. So Republicans, if they really decide to, mount this crazy rearguard action of just ignore what the voters say and just hand it over to Trump by fiat, I mean, they're going to lose everything. I mean, they stand to be completely wiped out. Even their supporters, I think, frankly, would be like, this is a bridge too far for us.
I can't see Mitt Romney.
No. Mitt Romney, Murkowski, Collins, Sass. I mean, these are the moderate Republicans who have all, by the way, congratulated President-elect Biden. They're not going to stand for that, and that might be enough to sway the party. Look, again, this is such a very small, vanishingly small contingency, and I know Vox put out a piece about this, and I just look, I don't see it. I don't even see the base wanting it at this point. This is the key thing. They're exhausted. They were promised a landslide victory, a mandate. They got the opposite. Now they're beginning to question their own faith. You're witnessing a kind of deprogramming.
Yes.
In real time, or at least not a deprogramming. That's going too far. But the disillusionment and the demoralization that usually precedes quitting a cult, or at least putting it to one side.
It begins to be. It feels like it's the first steps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to. When I did the Church of Scientology in 2007, there were people who left the church. People like my friend Mike Rinder, who left it who was still a believing Scientologist, but had a visceral dislike.
Keep going on. I'm going to just top up. Okay.
Yeah, sure thing.
I don't listen to anything you say anyway, so it won't affect the dynamic.
By the way, because
You like my decanter, by the way?
Because I'm not foolish, I've got mine.
Same thing. It's very boring because part of this podcast was every week we highlight or showcase a new libation and it's for the last 2 weeks, it's just the same thing. It's Primo, me with my Roku gin.
Yeah, I mean, these people have got no idea of what effort we're doing in advertising our project. It's just, I really quite like this wine, and I like, it makes me less depressed about the world if I have a decent drink in my hand, I have to say. Anyway, the point I was struggling to make is that when I did Scientology, there were people like Mike Render who'd left, but still retained their belief in some of the philosophy of Scientology, if I can put it like that. And I used to call them outs. And then there were people who had left the church, the structure, and also the belief pattern, and they were outs. And Mike, it took Mike 5 years, I think. But he became an out. And I think it's going to be the same with Trumpians. It takes a time for you to realize that you've been conned, and then longer for you to realize it's good for the world and your family and your friends that you admit that you've been conned.
So yeah, I mean, well,
and that takes time.
To take it in two other allegorical directions, that would be nice.
Let's do 3, 5.
Well, it will be 3 when I'm finished. So, but the more dangerous one is the ex-alcoholic who becomes what's known as a dry drunk, which is a strange and forbidding character who in many respects is even worse than when he was on the sauce, right? So what's left of ex-Trumpism? What's going to fill that void? It could be something way more destructive or frightening. And I think for some of these people, yeah, it will. Now, the other allegory would be, and I actually learned this when Mitt Romney was running for president. So the Mormon church, their practitioners are seen to be quite committed to every tenet of the faith. But actually, in practice, there are what's called Jack Mormons. And I think the naming comes from jackrabbits who just sort of bounce away very quickly. So like Mitt Romney, I think amongst sort of those in the know within his religion is a Jack Mormon. Not really, but kind of still in, but not really. So you're going to have the Jack Mormon version of the Trumpists who, oh yeah, MAGA, yeah, oh yeah, stolen election, yada, yada, yada. But, might secretly, I don't know, start masturbating to photos of Jill Biden, or I don't know, it's going to be weird. It's going to be, a bit creepy.
I'm going to raise the tone. I think that Joe has played a blinder. He's been presidential. He's been reasonable. When asked, he says, I think it's a little embarrassing, but he's not going for Trump. He's barely mentioning him. And what he is doing is logging up the calls, like people like Boris Johnson.
Yeah. You got Boris, you've got Macron, you've got Merkel. I think even Erdogan. Certainly the Turkish government has acknowledged reality, which is good. Yeah. I think Putin is the only holdout, but that's
Putin and Mr. Bonesaw in Saudi Arabia.
Bonesaw and Putin are the two that, and it, as it should be, right? I mean,
yeah.
As the Boys to Men song goes, it's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday. So give them the time they need to process this tragedy and this trauma.
If you're right, and I think you are,
well, that's a first.
No, I always think you're interesting, and I often think you're right. But
the only thing we ever disagreed on, as you said to me, the one time we shared a physical space together, was I was a bit snotty about the royal wedding. You're one of those like those aged lefty hacks that's you're a Republican with a small R, but you secretly have a Jones for the monarchy, which is I think similar to what we discussed the other day about the old lefty hacks who found Thatcher rather attractive. You're exactly in that camp. Exactly. It's like if you went on Tinder, you could just say, socialist-ish British correspondent, but here's what you need to know at the outset. Margaret Thatcher, sexy as hell, and also Will and Kate, not so bad. And that would almost say it all. That would be the perfect profile for you.
I'm not a monarchist. I quite like the royal family. One of the reasons I quite like the royal family is you don't have the monarchical bit of power locked in somebody like Trump, which makes it difficult to kind of revere your president. But if you've got Mrs. Queen, who's a good egg, who spent more time in uniform than the entire Trump family, because none of them ever have, because being in uniform is a loser, who did her bit against the Nazis, all that stuff, who is fundamentally, I think, a decent person, and kind of loved people like Kenneth Kaunda, the then president of Zambia, and sided with when there was a big battle inside the Commonwealth about apartheid. And it felt clear from her body language that Mrs. Queen was against white South Africa, whereas Mrs. T was in favor.
Yeah.
Or in favor of giving them the benefit of the doubt in a wrong way. And I can remember there was a wonderful spitting image show with a kind of creep whose spitting image called Dimbleby, going up to the Queen, and the Queen was going outside the gates of Fort Dagenham and going, socialist worker, get your socialist worker here. And Dimbleby would go, but your majesty, why are you selling socialist worker? And the Queen goes, because it annoys Mrs. Thatcher. Anyway, so I kind of like that bit of the monarchy, of the royal family, which I'm not entirely convinced exists, but there we are. By the way, if you've been watching, there's been a flurry in the royal dovecots this last couple of days, because last night ITV broadcast a documentary about how Martin Bashir got this great interview with Diana. And the evidence in the program was that Martin Bashir got a BBC freelance graphics designer to mock up a fake payment showing that one of Diana's staff was being secretly paid slush money by MI5 to spy on her. And this was a fake. The BBC investigated, and the investigation was led by Tony Hall, the Director General of the BBC, the previous one. And he's the guy who I would say didn't defend me when I was being attacked by Tommy Robinson and his cohorts. And this guy, Tony Hall, was in charge of the investigation. He gave Martin Bashir a clean bill of health, and he said the freelance graphics designer is not going to work for the BBC again. Now, what's happened is that it's clear from the evidence, clear to me anyway, that Martin Bashir, his case is very, very weak, and he says he's got COVID and cannot even read legal letters from ITV asking him serious questions. But he was photographed going to the off license to get some booze. So it looks as though
as one does when they have COVID, right?
Yeah. So it looks as though that the monarchy or the royal family or Princess Diana was conned into giving the interview. She probably would have given the interview anyway, but there's big questions about the way Martin Bashir behaved. I felt the moment I saw the documentary he did with Michael Jackson, where he wins Michael Jackson's affections. Michael Jackson was a was a poor and wretched man who was very, 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 very fucked up. But to go in, win his friendship, and then turn and say, oh, and then I heard he was a bit of a paedophile when everybody knew before, was a piece of gross journalistic dishonesty in my book. And Bashir has got a lot of questions to ask. I think.
Well, I always, you know, I suppose my guilty confession is, and I see why people of your disposition like the Queen. I mean, I like the Queen. I mean, I think she's held this thing together nobly and with dignity long past its sell-by date, right? And in the whole, you know, fracas, Diana, the Queen, and then Diana, the ex-wife, is dead, and the Queen does. I thought Elizabeth was on the side of right. Like, you know, look, this is an institution. My whole role here, and by the way, I wasn't meant to be running this. This was an accident of history because my uncle was insane and sided with Hitler and then ran off with some American divorcee. So this is the cards I've been dealt. I don't have to. Basically, it was fuck your feelings before fuck your feelings became a kind of reactionary slogan in the United States, but done with your classic kind of English sang-froid and stoicism. And I quite like that about her. Sang-froid, excuse me. Are we, it's like a Pimsleur, you know, are we doing French lessons, or are you going to teach me Swahili next? I mean, fuck off, man. I'm a writer. I think in text, I don't have to pronounce these words out loud. But anyway, do you see what I mean? Like, when she goes, the whole edifice comes tumbling down. It becomes indefensible.
It does, unless you've got to deal with the Trump family. So I think that, yeah, it's...
By the way, I want you, now you've got me pissed off. So I want you to pronounce the word valet.
Valet.
No, wrong. Your lot say valet.
No, I don't. I say valet.
Ah, but the English pronunciation of that word. So you know who says it that way? Stephen Fry as Jeeves in the Woodhouse adaptation. So you are a very bad Englishman. You're too cosmopolitan for your own good.
No, I'm common, which is, and there are a lot of us, but I've never had a valet or valet, so I don't know how to pronounce such a thing.
But you have read P.G. Woodhouse.
Yes, of course I have.
And
by the way, hold on a sec. I'm gonna don't even go there. So when I won an Amnesty International award about a radio documentary I made.
Just drop that in there, don't you?
Yeah, just drop. I'll explain why. It was about Chechen torture victims of the Russian secret police in Chechnya and Ingushetia in 2000, and what they did, and they tortured people in horrific ways. And I spent about a week interviewing people who had been tortured in horrible, horrible ways, and I had to get to sleep at night. And what I would do, and I brought with me, because I knew this shit I knew it was going to be dark, not quite as dark as it turned out to be, but I brought with me 6. When I passed through Heathrow, went to the bookshop, and I bought 6 P.G. Woodhouse books, which I'd got at home, but in a hurry, I hadn't brought them with me. And I would go to bed with a bottle of vodka and 6 P.G. Woodhouse. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was both laughing so much at the ghastly Snowd and Aunt Agatha's cow creamer being smuggled from one bit of the house to the other, and pissed out of my head because of the vodka. I could actually get out of my head the stuff about these guys being forced with a Russian gas mask. They call it the slon, an elephant. They took the nozzle out and they would squirt CS gas down the funnel. So these guys would start drowning in their own snot and tears until they lifted the gas mask because they were tied behind. Awful stuff. When I finally left, I had a wonderful and comically beautiful Chechen translator who is helping me tell these stories. And as well as paying her, I said, by the way, you can have all of my P.G. Wodehouse books. And the joy in her eyes was great. And one day, I hope perhaps that Chechnya will become independent and that she might be the new press secretary for the new decent president of Chechnya. This is a dream, but never mind. And I want her to introduce the press conference in the following terms. Tinkety-tonk, chaps. So I love P.G. Wodehouse, but I don't know how to pronounce valet. Valet.
I guess that's, Edwardian English pronunciation. Yeah, you're not alone. What's his name? I'm going to fuck it up. But you remember, the great English travel writer? There's so many of them, but one who literally was parachuted into occupied Greece in World War II.
Oh, yeah. It's the guy who wrote Between the Woods and the Water, Patrick Leigh Moore.
That's him. I believe, I might be completely screwing this up, but Anthony, not Anthony Lane in the New Yorker, who's a wonderful English prose stylist. I want to say he did a profile of him. And one of the things that they have in common is a total adoration of Wodehouse. And whenever he would visit Patrick Leigh Moore, he would say, so, how many times have you read Code of the Worcesters in the last 2 weeks? And the answer would be something like 6. It was the Bible for English prose stylists. And the thing about Wodehouse, of course, is that, you read him and it just seems so simple and effortless, but in fact, it took him quite a lot of work to be that funny and to be that.
Yes. So one of my heroes is Muggeridge, who I met when I was a cub reporter on the Sheffield Telegraph when he was at AC. His mother came from Sheffield, and he gave me an excuse because I was on the Sheffield Telegraph to interview him. And his great claim to fame was when he was in MI5 or MI6. I think he was in MI6, and at the end of towards the end of the war, he was dropped into France, arrived in liberated Paris, and one of his jobs was to see whether P.G. Wodehouse would be prosecuted. Because he'd got, being a bit of a twit, he got left behind, and the Germans used him to make a couple of broadcasts for Nazi radio.
Yeah, but that indictment of him, the moral indictment of him, I think was completely wrong-headed. And, there's the famous Orwell defense of Wodehouse on that score.
Yes, but not only that, but Muggeridge, who was doing it for the British government for MI6, he met him, they had tea, it was just, have I been silly? Yes, you have been silly. But anyway, Muggeridge wrote a report saying, for God's sake, don't prosecute this guy.
Yeah, no.
And that was the end of it. And what was sweet was they finally, when he was 90, they finally gave him a knighthood. Mrs. Queen did.
Yeah, well deserved.
Sorry?
He's one of the, I said well deserved, but we mentioned, I think last week, you've got the Brits who leave the sceptred isle and move to America. And the ones who wind up in New York or Washington, that's its own species of expat or diaspora. And then you've got the ones that move to California. So Wodehouse managed to kind of split the difference because he was, he became a Broadway balladeer or I don't know, a stage writer for a while. And then he moved out west. And then he got a bit fuzzy-headed, the whole Bidewee animal shelter stuff, and he loved animals more than he loved people, quintessentially English. But he I put him in the category, the Isherwood category, a little too Southern Californian. Whereas the East Coast expat community, the one that I more identify with, you've got Hitchens, you've got Auden, you've got what's his name? God. The one that Anthony Hayden Am I saying that right? The one that the character in Bonfire of the Vanities is
Anthony Hayden Guest. Yeah.
Anthony Hayden Guest, right?
Yeah.
Famously confused, that character, often mistaken for being based on Hitchens, but was based on Anthony Hayden Guest. And there was Hitchens would tell this story that, you know, Guest at one point like accosted Hitchens when Hitchens said, no, actually, this is based on Anthony, not on myself. And you can ask Tom Wolfe if you don't believe me. And Guest sort of went up to him on, I think, courthouse steps and started to physically choke Hitchens. Said, you've ruined me, you've made me the subject of mockery and satire and blah, blah. And Hitchens replied, Anthony, the only thing I've done is convey to millions of readers that you have an enormous cock. And he said, and then I could feel Anthony's hands palpably relax around my throat.
I think Autumn Poem, September the 1st, 1939 is my favorite poem ever.
Yeah, you and a lot of people. I disagree on that, though, as an Auden fanatic.
It's a great poem, though.
It is, and it's, I mean, you know, it really was written very quickly. Unfortunately, the dive bar on, what was it, 52nd Street?
Yeah.
Is long been shuttered. So, but that would have been a great monument to preserve in New York. Unfortunately, whatever, that city planning for you, or
under no, America will be cool again.
Yeah, I mean, for me though, I think Spain is the better poem, even though Auden would certainly disagree with me. Auden's biographer and a state or literary executor, yet again, Edward Mendelsohn, excuse me, would also disagree with me. But I just think that, and that was the one that famously Orwell attacked him very scurrilously, and I think incorrectly, for justifying murder for the sake of history with a capital H, or the sake of communism. He was doing no such thing. He was being ironic about the totalitarian mindset. But I think that's just a much better poem from a technical and also some symbolic perspective than September 1. But I understand why people love September 1. I mean, it was the most well-trafficked piece of verse after 9/11. It's kind of a rallying cry in a way, but I don't know.
Let's bring this back to Joe.
Yeah,
he's the only person in big politics I've ever come across who loves Seamus Heaney so much that he keeps on, you know, reading that out. And when you see it on Twitter, folks, I mean, Joe is reading out this wonderful, and then there are times, if I've got it right, when let hope and history rhyme. Mm-hmm. And it's so beautiful and so moving. And the idea that Joe is reading that out is lovely. I mean, we have a man in the White House soon, fingers crossed, inshallah, who loves the greatest Irish poet ever. Oh, all right, okay, that's an argument with W.B. Yeats. A great Irish poet.
Yes.
Great Irish poet.
Fair.
I did Seamus Heaney at school for O-level, and therefore I'm a Heaneyite more than a W.B. Although W.B. Yeats there are some fucking wonderful poems too as well.
Yeah, An Irish Airman Foresees His Fate. I mean, that's a beautiful poem. Encapsulates quite a lot in very few lines. Good economy of language there. So for me, what I would like to see, if I had my blue sky inauguration planning moment, I would say, give me Daniel Day-Lewis playing Joe Biden, reading Cecil Day-Lewis. And I think we're just about there. There's the perfect postmodern coda on a postmodern authoritarian nightmare.
There's a funny Hugh Bonneville is the actor who plays the dad in Paddington. By the way, I love Paddington. I loved it as a kid. I love the films. I love the fact that Hugh Grant is the baddie in Paddington 2. But when Hugh Bonneville went on Desert Island Discs, he got a fantastic. What he was trying to do in a clever way was get a triple whammy. So it's got one selection, but it is Peter Sellers pretending to be Laurence Olivier as Richard III, reading out the lyrics to A Hard Day's Night. I think it goes something like this. And so when I think of you, it makes me think of a hard day's night. And what you've got is a kind of weird, the word kind of wave of the Beatles, that great song. And Peter Sellers taking the piss of Laurence Olivier, taking the piss out of the darkest character in Shakespeare in his very funny accent. And it's so that is my, if you're looking for triple whammy rhyming nonsense, that's honestly my number one thing. The only other thing is there's a friend of mine who's a great guy, who's a Welsh doctor, David Knott. And he went to Syria, he went to Aleppo, and he was treating patients and teaching the Syrian surgeons how to do war surgery. And at one point, somebody from Islamic State was injured, was in serious danger of dying, and David's treating him. And David's half Welsh, half Burmese, and looks a little bit brown, but doesn't look Syrian. But even so, the moment Islamic State realized, I mean, if this patient had died, then they would have killed him. So a real hero. His thing on Desert Island Discs, and it's lovely, David Knott's Desert Island Discs, is he picked, because he travels everywhere all the time, but he's Welsh and Welsh speaking, he picked I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane in Welsh. So if you ever listen to this, if you ever have to go on a sad journey and listen to, you're going away from your loved ones, but you listen to I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane in Welsh, you cannot but laugh. It's really.
Have you ever heard Rock the Casbah in Arabic, in its original Arabic?
I'd love to. It's one of my favorite songs.
It's a brilliant, it's actually, okay, and this sounds a bit sensationalistic, but it's almost better than the original. And I will send it to you, and then I will.
Yeah, we can tweet it.
I will tweet it on the Twitter account because it has to be heard.
So is this, by the way, is this entire conversation proof that there is a future after Trump, where people like us?
No, I think, American history to a large extent is a series of anticlimaxes. There's a great deal of pent-up emotion and frenzy and alarmism and a sense that, the end is nigh, and then it all kind of just fizzles, and then we reset and return to a status quo ante. I mean, how many losses of American innocence have there been? JFK's assassination, or the quiz show scandal, or Richard Nixon's Watergate, and it just goes on and on and on and on like this. And I think we discussed this. We had Peter Pomerantsev on the program many months ago, and the question I put to him was, look, in 1989, we had this teleological notion that history was coming into an end, right? It was a caricature of the Fukuyama argument, fine, and I've read so many fucking essays telling me that everyone's got Fukuyama wrong. I don't want what I'm saying now to lead to another goddamn essay telling me I've got Fukuyama wrong. No, he didn't quite say this, but the way it was interpreted was, the way it came down to hoi polloi was, history was pulling into the station, Soviet totalitarianism was over, not fascism was over. This was now the dawn of total democratization and blah, blah, blah. And that turned out to be bullshit. I mean, you had the war in the Balkans.
Okay, can I listen? I would
wait. Let me finish the.
I just on this on Fukuyama, I can there's a moment in my life. I cover the Romanian Revolution. I drive across Romania from Timișoara to Bucharest on Christmas Eve 1989. I then go home to see my little kid and my then wife, and we have a nice Christmas. Then I fly out for New Year's Eve, whatever it is, and I cross into Romania from Bulgaria in a Trabant. We're hitching, we don't have any money, me and the photographer, observer photographer, and as we're driving across the Danube, I think it is, into Romania, the photographer starts talking about this guy, Francis Fukuyama, and he's written this piece and he says we're all fucked because this is the end of history and there won't be any need for any reporters anymore. And I can remember thinking, oh God, I'm going to be out of a job. As you know,
I mean, look how that turned out. There was no end of history. History kind of kept slogging on, and now you have the counterpoint, which really came into its own in late Trumpism, which was the end of liberal democracy. What comes next after liberalism? It's wokeism. It's the successor ideology. Or no, it's authoritarian populism. It's all of these prognostications have proven to be false. So liberal democracy is alive and well. We just had a massive sort of rebuttal of the idea that it was not even on life support, but practically dead. I mean, what more do you want? And this is not, by the way, to say that Joe Biden being elected changes everything and solves all of America's problems. It doesn't. And, if you check out my other podcast with the former president of Estonia, I ask him.
It's called Foreign Policy, folks.
No, it's called Foreign Office, folks.
Anyway, I get everything wrong.
I tribute to you and your kind, but thank you for that. Anyway, and I said to him, what has this taught you, meaning the social democratically minded or centrist Europeans? He's like, look, it happened once, it can happen again. So in that sense, this has been a net positive for the continent because it teaches us we really do have to take destiny into our own hands. We really do have to have our own security policy. We really do have to stop sort of pretending that, the Americans will sort it, because the Americans might not be around to sort it, and that is a good lesson. That is a good lesson to be taught.
What are the other positives from Trump?
For Americans, I think it's the idea that we came close to having something that was just so anti-democratic, and look, I've always been very reluctant. I don't like the term fascism when applied to the American political system. I think it's cheap. I think it's lazy, but it's the closest we've come to it. And if this is the version that we had to suffer through, as opposed to, say, a competent version, a hardworking version, a mindful, detail-oriented version, then that's good, because that will have put us on guard for future incarnations of it. There was a piece written in the Atlantic last week. Again, I think a bit overcooked, but it was, if you think Trump was bad, wait till you see the smarter version of it. See, but will there be a smarter version? Because this is the thing, the excesses that were built up, let me start with this. The antibodies that were built up in reaction to Trump, which then led to certain excesses, were so overwhelming that I think Americans for quite a while, and I understand we have a short-term memory, and 4 years of Joe Biden, or even fewer years of Joe Biden if he decides to cede it to Kamala Harris early or whatever, we're going to forget what's happened, but it's going to come back very quickly. What I mean to say is, social media deciding we need to put safeguards on disinformation emanating from within. Americans saying, this is a capture or a seizure of power by an illegitimate actor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to make it very hard for the smarter version of this to kind of smuggle through the back door, or smuggle itself through the back door. And that is a net positive, which is why, by the way, at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd protest movement, my eye was on what's really taking place here, what really matters. And what mattered is tearing down Confederate monuments and statues in places like Birmingham, Alabama, which has a Black mayor who said it was torn down by the people, and that's not the way things should go. But you know what? The city is happy to pay a fine to the state and say, yeah, it's a fait accompli. That stuff mattered more to me than the cultural excesses, which were, let's start tearing down statues of George Washington or Thomas Jefferson even, or, Abraham Lincoln, for the sake of argument. When it became self-parodying and everyone, conservatives started to say, this is the beginning of Maoism in America. No, it's not. And also, getting rid of Donald Trump is one of the easiest ways to stop this sort of overfed pushback movement called woke progressivism or just wokeism, right? I mean, this is going to stop it in its tracks, or at least mitigate it, because you have now a centrist Democrat, a believing Catholic at the helm of the country. And all of a sudden, the Liberal Party is no longer talking in the language of, right, he said something stupid when he was 14 years old, cut his head off or throw him out of a job. Things will get a little bit more back to normal. It's not a salve for everything, but it's a good start.
Not only, let me go further. America is in danger of being cool again.
No, it's not. No, this is the wrong thing. America, my slogan for the last 4 years was "Make America Boring Again." Joe Biden to me is a warm, stale bowl of farina. Actually, a warm, stale bowl of farina that's gone off, right? Like, this is just pablum. Feed it to me slowly, feed it to me consistently. I just want to feel, I want it to stick to my ribs. I just want to feel like warm and safe and comfortable. I don't want like this rancid Chipotle jalapeno, fart infused taco jammed down my throat. That's what I've had. I don't want America to be exciting and provocative. I want America to be boring. No, that's all I want for the next 4 years.
Okay, so the moment when the result comes in, you go on the Twitter and you see kids, young people dancing in the street, and there's somebody's got the Merry Christmas song, and they're dancing underneath a gas station, and there are dancing in Pennsylvania, and I suddenly thought America is cool again. I'm not saying it's woke or anything like that. It's just that people are expressing real joy. And another thing, I thought that the images of John McCain, a Republican, up there with John Lewis in the heavens looking down, that's beautiful and lovely. Yeah. So the last 4 years, I've hated the idea of a United States of America run by Trump, and it's got into my soul, and that's a bad thing, and it's a foolish thing, because America is much greater than its president. But nevertheless, in the last few days, I'm falling in love with America all over again. I'd like to go. Where's your wine place in California? What's it called? That valley where you go?
Sonoma Valley.
Yeah, and to go one of those, get a soft top car, and go for a hunt.
Let's not dress up your low functioning alcoholism as love of America. We don't.
Anyway, I'll take a train. It'll be an electric train. I don't care. All I'm saying is that America,
as Lord Byron once famously put it, in England, cant is so much stronger than cunt. And that's what we're hearing right now. Like, oh, I want to go to Sonoma Valley and taste all your varietals because I love America. No, you don't.
You're wrong.
It's because you're a dipsomaniac. That's why you want to come here and drink all our wine.
I don't want to drink all your wine. I'd just like to have a bit of a go. But I do.
Bit of a go.
The point is that American culture, American thing, and the thing of America, what it is, it feels like it's back. And the fact that it's a bit boring, and the guy, the figurehead is, he can't remember where he put the keys, but he's a profoundly decent man. And he's getting it right more often than he's getting it wrong. And then it allows everybody to have their disagreements, and they will continue in a reasonable space. It feels like
he's a steward. He's a steward. He is a reminder of what was, even if, kind of a Weekend at Bernie's style reminder, but that's fine. Again, it's exactly what we needed. It's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want, and this is why the argument, the Democratic Socialists, the AOC, the Squad, no, we need to shake things up from the other side. No, we don't. Shut the fuck up. That's exactly the wrong prescription for what we need right now. And, Joe Biden is warm mush, and warm mush is what America wants. It's what it craves. It's like, well, wait a minute. I just want to go back to a period where, the president does not tweet, and his tweets do not become front page articles in the New York Times. Journalists start paying attention to what's happening in their own backyards, or better yet,
in the world
200 miles down the road from where they live, which they haven't been doing for a long time. You want to litigate, or you want to put revolution, on the as an Oxford debate in this country? Sure. Wait a while, though. Wait a while. We're not ready for that right now. As I said to you, it's a patient in the ICU, hemorrhaging from the eyeballs and the ears and the nose, and bringing in fucking homeopaths talking about, well, we should be like, these are the crystals they'll need when they're on the road to the recovery. Fuck off. I don't want to hear that. This was a massive victory for saving the republic that is the United States of America. It is a massive victory, as you pointed out, for decency and sort of kind of everyday American politics, which isn't great, but much better than what has come in the last 4 years. And that's enough.
It's more than enough. Now, we should say goodbye. Next time, whenever that may be, I want to think about how the rest of the world, Mr. President Xi, President Putin, may be looking at a new Uncle Joe in power, but one in the White House. That'd be good fun. You've been listening to The Last Call with me, John Sweeney, in London, and Mike Weiss, not in Botswana, correctly pronounced, but New York. I'm trying to find how to switch this off. There we go. Whoop.